This episode is sponsored by Sourcing Playground. Sourcing Playground is an online platform making it easier for brands to connect with compliant, ethical, and sustainable manufacturers. Think Match.com, but for retail. You can post your project for free and let the suppliers come to you. On the platform, you can easily compare quotes and factory profiles to choose the right supplier for your brand. Sourcing Playground are offering a free upgrade to the Fashion Feed listeners, which means your project will only be viewed by the factories and hidden from public view. Go to www.sourcingplayground.com to check it out and mention the Fashion Feed in the chat box. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Fashion Feed podcast. This is episode 20 and it's another solo episode with me today because, well, if any of you follow me on Instagram, you see that I do my weekly planning on Sunday evenings on my Insta stories. And I get so many comments about it and I'm like, yes, I will do it, I promise. And I have let it slip a little bit over Christmas. And I did it again yesterday and sort of brought it back for 2020 and realised that the podcast comes out on Thursday and I don't have a guest. But luckily I do have a bank of all these ideas that I always want to talk to you about, and I was like, okay, well, what better way than to do another episode and talk to you about how to get out of a creative rut. And I can imagine a lot of you have sort of seen on Instagram that it's like new year, new me, I'm so productive, I've got all these ideas, like 2020 is going to be my year, I've done this, I've done that already, and it's getting to the end of the month and you're like, this feeling is not kicking in yet, like when is it going to come? And sometimes it does come completely naturally, but I thought maybe we could suggest some ideas of how to encourage it if it's not coming as quickly as you'd like. And maybe you need to update your products or move on your bestseller and you're just like, I'm completely stumped. I had this one idea and it sold really well. It's reached the peak of its sales period and I know it's only going in one direction from here. So I'm going to give you some steps, 5 steps on how to get out of a creative rut. Maybe grab a pen and paper as well if you have one, like just hit pause and grab one. Obviously, if you're driving, then maybe listen to it again when you get home. But the first step is to brain dump everything. And when I mean everything, I'm like talking about I need to feed the cat, I need to clean the sink. Everything that's going on in your brain is taking up valuable creative space. And I liken it to if you're going to run the bath and all these ideas are coming and lots more ideas, the bath's going to overspill at some point. So you need to let the tap out. And the brain dumping is almost taking the tap out the bath and letting some things go. And do not overthink this process. I want you just to write anything, however menial it is, like get dressed in the morning, shampoo my hair on Wednesday in time for this, or it doesn't even need to make sense. It doesn't need to be in order. Just get it out of your brain and take the tap out the bath. Then the next thing to do is sort of draw a cross, so like the positive sign. So you're cutting your piece of paper into 4. The top left-hand side is everything that's basically a priority, but in that box I want you to write must, and in the top right-hand box I want you to write should. In the bottom left-hand box, you write could, and in the bottom right-hand box, you write want to. Now, this is something I saw on Instagram from somebody called Fiona Likes to Blog, and it's so good. Maybe I'll share the picture if I know how on the show notes. I'll put a link to Fiona's page. So like I said, everything in the must box is priority. This has to be done. And if you're listening to this live in January, at the end of January, maybe that's do your tax return because you've got 4 days left to do it. Or must could be post my things to my customers. You have to do that. Then should could be I probably should look for some new ideas for my collection. Could is like I could go to the gym. And want to is, I want to binge this new Netflix series that so-and-so told me about. And then once you've got everything from your brain dump you transferred into one of these boxes, you pretty much just go in order. So top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. And the step one for this, before we move on to the next thing, is make sure you just grab your diary now and diarise some time for this. I'd maybe give it an hour, maybe just over, but definitely no less than that. You want to be able to give yourself some time to really, really think about it. Think how much is going on inside your mind, and almost don't shortchange yourself by rushing this process, because it is super important. Moving on to step 2, you want to be able to reconnect with your purpose and why you're doing this in the first place. You started a creative project for a reason, and we want to know what that reason is and just sort of get back to that place. If you've been following me for a while, if you're brand new, then I always bang on about Simon Sinek, and he did this TED Talk, which is possibly one of the most viewed TED Talks that's happened, and it does look a little bit older now because it was a while ago that he recorded it, but there's a really, really important message in there, which is people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you don't know why you're doing it, it's so easy to give up. And just reconnecting with that purpose to get you back to that very first creative stage of your business. You've probably got sucked into doing the accounts or doing admin or becoming a social media manager overnight. Like, you just don't realise that you have to do all these other things as well. You're like, I just wanted to be a fashion designer. Which is absolutely fine, but all those other things do need to be done as well. And the creative thing is very easy to push to the bottom of the pile. But if you reconnect with your why and your purpose, it can bring those creative juices back. Some people don't like that phrase, so sorry if you don't. And some questions that you can ask yourself. So the step or the task I'm going to give you from step 2 is watch the TED Talk. It's called How Great Leaders Inspire Action, just search Simon Sinek and it comes up. And ask yourself these questions. Why did you choose fashion? Why do you want people to feel special in your designs? Why is that important to you? And why now? And I think once you start answering those questions, and again, not overthinking your answers, it doesn't need to be perfect, it doesn't need to be shown to anybody, it's just for you and getting back to those first stages of your business where you were super excited about it and letting the ideas flow. Step 3 for getting out of a creative rut, that is a mouthful, is getting out to the shops, and ideally your local city rather than your local village or your local town, and take a phone, pen and paper with you. And when I say phone, I mean like camera. And you want to go to somewhere that's got like a mix of department stores and boutiques. So say, for example, it was London, you'd want to go to Selfridges, you'd want to go to Liberty's, you'd maybe want to go to Goodhood. There's a new department store on Oxford Street called Flannels, which is like some cool new streetwear brands mixed with high-end luxury. And they've really, really invested in the interiors. And you could go down to Carnaby Street. Maybe you could go to Brick Lane or Portobello Road and really get a whole mix of vintage, high-end, and mash it all together to get some new ideas. And remember, this isn't a trip for you to go shopping. It's a focus on your customer and what's new in the shops that you think she would like. You want to be looking at window displays. What's the imagery above the till? What are the key messages that are being portrayed when you first walk into the store? It's really important to actually even look at the layout of the shop, because the things that the brands are feeling for the most, they'll put right at the front of the store, and sometimes even right in front of you, so you can't even walk into the store, you've got to walk around it. What is that first bay of clothing that they're putting in front of your eyes? Because that's the thing that store is feeling the strongest for. Maybe you can start spotting some common themes between the stores. So it might be like polka dots or neutral tones or soft textures or animal print. Whatever it is, go into the first store and pretty much write down everything that you see, and not even necessarily individual pieces. It's what's the overall message that they're trying to give me. Is it like casual? Is it smart? Is it like puff sleeves? Is it 80s? Is it noughties? Whatever it is, just start writing down some words about the things that you're seeing. And then if you go into the next shop and you don't see some of it, but you see some others, you're like, okay, yeah. And you can almost keep like a tally chart, and you're like, yes, this shop had it, and this shop and this shop. And then when you get to the end of the day, you can see which trends have the most dashes on them. And you're like, okay, cool. If everyone's feeling for that, then that's probably going to be big. And also, I want you to know that you're like, but that's what's in the shops now, and I'm looking for next year. That's true, totally. And I also encourage people to sign up to trend forecasting websites and newsletters like WGSN and Fashion Snoops. But trends don't move as quickly as people think they do. Maybe some micro trends sort of pop in and out, but that's why they'll be the things that have the fewest tallies. You know, they're just like little micro trends, but the things that like everybody are doing, like polka dots, neutrals and soft fabrics, there's a reason I picked those for examples, because they will be around for longer. They've got sort of a longer shelf life. And when I was working in retail, it was really so important to book this time out away from your desk, because you're so in the thick of it and your head gets so far in, you can't see the wood for the trees. Your decision making becomes a little bit less lackluster, or it's something that buyers prioritize when they're in retail, and they put it in their diary and nothing is allowed to move that, because some people are like, oh, you're just going shopping, or I've heard it all before, but it's not that. It's so important to know what your competitors are doing, feel inspired, get creative, and come up with new ideas for your next selection. So the task for step 3 is maybe, I don't know, put it in your diary, obviously, but how can you make that official? So do you need to book train tickets to get there? Whatever it might be, just make sure that you add this to your to-do list, because I can't stress how important it is. Task 4 is, can you do something else that's creative or active to give you some inspired energy? Now, remember, the point of this is to get you out of a creative rut, and the ideas start flowing usually when you're not really forcing it. So if you're not keen on a few of the steps that we've spoken about so far, let's try something completely different. And it might be a good idea to write down a list of things that give you energy. And it doesn't really matter what kind of energy it is. It might be hanging out with your mum or your sister or your friend, or just spending time on your own. Actually, that can be really important as well for some people. Maybe you could go for a drive in silence. I do this. I don't know what it is, but just driving around in total silence. In fact, I do know what it is. It's the fact I can't be on my phone. If I'm driving, obviously I can't look at my phone, and I'll try and go like quite far away. Maybe I'll drive like half an hour, 45 minutes away, and then drive back. But I'm not allowed to stop. I'm not allowed to look at my phone. I don't put the radio on, and it's just silence. And it's almost like forced time for daydreaming. If you don't drive, going for a walk is exactly the same. And I remember when I was younger, my dad was always like, go for a walk because you see a lot. And it sounds really basic, but when I'm walking, I always keep that in mind, because I'm then sort of looking at the colour of the trees, or like community halls with special events on, or I don't know, it's interesting. It just sort of opens your eyes. Again, if you've got a podcast on, or you're looking at your phone, or you're looking at your feet, just look up and start looking around you and get inspired by the things that you see. Perhaps you can look for a local sewing or knitting group and spending some time with other creatives. I also am such a grandma, I'm exposing all my secrets now, but I really love those colouring books, the adult colouring books. because it just switches my mind off from thinking about absolutely anything else. I'm just sort of picking colours and trying to stay inside the lines, and it is so basic, but there's a reason why it kind of takes your mind away from the day-to-day things. And then you do start thinking of other ideas as well whilst you're doing it. I'm not very good at drawing, but maybe you are, and it is probably something that you really enjoy, and you're just like, oh, I don't have time to do it. You need to make time. And I don't know, I must have said important about 500 times so far, but yeah, maybe it's making music or listening to music. Are you a writer? Can you start doing some creative writing and writing a short story, attending acting classes, or trying out a new exercise class? Just pick one thing. This is your task for step 4, is pick one thing and add it to your diary. Make time for it, highlight it in a certain colour so it's non-negotiable. If somebody says, do you want to go out for a drink, or, feel free to go, but just move it somewhere else in your diary. Don't just delete it or forget about it, because reconnecting with your creative passion outside of your job, which is kind of what it is. I think sometimes it's hard when you make your hobby your job. You almost need to come up with a different hobby so that you don't feel completely out of creative ideas. And then the last step number 5, to get out of a creative rut, is to look outside of your niche. And Joanne at Arnold and Bird and I always talk about this, but I thought it might be a good idea to give you some really practical ideas of what you could do. Maybe you could go somewhere you've never been before. It might be a town or a city that you could go on a little day break, or a road trip, or whatever. Like, I've never been to Oxford. I've never been to, I'm trying to think of things now, the Lake District. I've always wanted to go there. It's not really a day trip. It's more like a little weekend mini break, but that's fine. Just going somewhere you've never been before is a really nice idea, but also I think it could kind of get you out of your routine and just spice things up a bit, add a little spontaneity, and yeah, I think you could come up with some really exciting things in new surroundings. The Fashion and Textiles Museum in South London, it's also amazing. It's got really good workshops, classes, inspired exhibitions that happen there, and it's super busy. There's always something going on there. The Tate Modern, they've really upped their game last year, and I think they'll do the same this year with the exhibitions that they're showing. They're super relevant to what's happening in the world. And the V&A as well. I think the V&A is just amazing, and it's also in South London, so you could probably even make a day of it. If you've never been to either of those things, that could be your place, somewhere new that you've never been. And then outside of that, so Fashion and Textiles Museum, the Tate Modern, the V&A, they're all still kind of within the arts and fashion world. So when I'm saying look outside of your niche, that's kind of still within the niche. But perhaps you could buy some interiors magazines. So even though it's got nothing to do with fashion, it's still interesting to see what the trends are in interiors, or the way they use colour palettes, or the way they use textures within those. It could be really inspiring. Just going to your local museum, it might have absolutely nothing to do with it. You might go and see a Viking exhibition or something. It doesn't matter. It's something that's completely different to sort of snap you out of your routine and to spark an idea that could come from that. The British Library have some incredible things going on. I did a brilliant workshop there before, and it was only about £40. They do amazing talks, and again, they're always really relevant to small businesses, so I'd check them out. Or something as random as looking at in a comic book shop. It doesn't have to be fashion or arts. It can be completely outside of your comfort zone, and again, maybe you've never been to a comic book shop before, and seeing all the creative ideas that come from that. And that's everything. So I guess task number 5 is to pick somewhere on a map that you've never been before. Find, look up on TripAdvisor what the local attractions are and just go and see them. Don't overthink it. Just go with it and see where it takes you. And I would actually be really interested to see what happens from you taking these steps and the inspired ideas that come from it. It would be really exciting to hear that. And if you enjoyed this episode or you feel inspired or motivated, definitely get in touch and let me know. Or you could leave a review on iTunes and let me know there, because it really helps other people discover the podcast. And it's not just me asking you for something. I'm more than happy to give it back to you. And next time on the podcast, I'm going to read out some of your reviews. And if you leave your Instagram handle, I'll read the whole review out from you and also shout you out. So hopefully you'll get some new followers or new engagement, or maybe some even new customers. So I would absolutely love to hear from you. What you need to do on iTunes is just scroll right to the bottom of this page, and hopefully the page will come up where you see the stars, and you just tap leave a review. Write out something lovely for me, or just tell me a little bit about you. That's absolutely fine. Or what inspired you, or what your favourite episode is. It can be super short, but I feel like I've not done one of these little pitches for a while to leave a review. So yeah, this is my little request. If I gave you any sort of energy or inspiration today, I'd be super grateful. So yeah, I'll be back in 2 weeks to inspire you some more, hopefully. And in the meantime, you can follow me at Elizabeth Stiles UK on Instagram. See you then.